my colleagues, and also our beloved Magister students. So today we have an honor and privilege to welcome Professor Paula Schiess-Sommer to be with us in this very happy occasion. Let me read this before I make mistake. So, she's going to deliver her lecture on the topic of democratic governance in developing countries, the Latin American experience. Professor Paula Schiess-Sommer is a renowned scholar in the field of public administrations and holds the esteemed position of professor at the State University of Santa Catarina in Brazil. Her profound insights and expertise in the realm of democratic governance, particularly in the context of developing countries with a focus on Latin America, have garnered her international recognition. With an extensive academic background, Professor Paula contributions transcends academia. She is a key collaborator at the Interdisciplinary Center for Development and Social Management at the Federal University of Bahia, and is the leader of the research group Politeia, Co-Productions of the Public Good, Accountability and Governance. Is that correct? So her commitment to advancing knowledge in this area is further evidenced by her membership in the International Society for Third Sector Research since 2000. Not only a thought leader in research, Professor Paula is also deeply engaged in practical efforts to transform societies. She is the founder and an active member of the Brazilian Social Management Research Network, displaying her dedication to fostering impactful change through academia and collaboration. Her affiliations with organizations like the International Research Society for Public Management and her involvement in local civil society organizations and social projects underline her commitment to translating research into real-world solutions. With academic credentials, including a PhD in administration from the Getulio Vargas Foundation, a master's in administration from the Federal University of Bahia, and a bachelor's in administration from the University of, I don't know how to spell this out, Caxias do Sul, okay? Paula's expertise is truly multidimensional. As the editor of the academic journal Revista Gestão Organizacional, she actively shapes the discussion in her field. At last, Professor Paula, in this forthcoming lecture, we are privileged to delve into the rich insight from you. So I'm hoping that this is going to be one of the lectures that you've been waiting for. This is a rare opportunity to have Professor Paula among us. And please keep that in mind that we already sent them your article. So hopefully they're already read it and then engage into further discussion with you. So without further ado, please welcome Professor Paula Sommer. Give an applause.
Well, okay, yes, okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm really very happy and honored to be here, to be received by all the professors and to meet you this evening. Thank you for coming and thank you for this introduction and your interest. I hope we could share some of the topics I've been working, but also to listen from you, your questions, your perspectives. So I don't know if we can use the presentation. I have a presentation and we are here. I am here this week because we plan to develop a collaboration, a long-standing collaboration between my research group in Brazil, but also with other colleagues in Brazil and Latin America, with you here, with NIPA, STLM Jakarta, and other colleagues in institutions in Indonesia, because we see we have a lot of similarities, a lot in common, and a lot we can learn and share and improve our public services and our researchers and our role as academic and public servants. So I hope this evening is part of this process, but we continue discussing and of course elaborating together papers and new research projects or other projects, and I hope to receive you in Brazil too. All of you are invited to come and to see what we have there, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you very much. And so today we will talk about democratic governance in developing countries. Especially, I will say something about my experience in Latin America, but also with the focus in co-production and accountability, because it's the paper you received. And I will tell you how we are using these concepts and also their connection with other concepts, but mainly with practices, with initiatives, concrete initiatives that we are experiencing in Brazil and other Latin American countries, and also the challenges, the gaps, the setbacks we have. We will discuss. Can I move it or yes? Well, this is the research group Politeia. We recently changed the name. Then we included more concepts because we have many colleagues that are working with different topics. I personally work more with the two first topics: co-production of the public good and innovation in the public sector, and the second one, accountability, transparency, open government, and co-production of control. I will try to explain you what we consider as co-production of control. And please, the next one. To start, since we are talking about democratic development in democracies, this is the index annually published by The Economist in the UK. And you see that in Brazil, we are here, we are this big, can I? Here we are in Brazil. Brazil is this big blue, and Indonesia, we are in the same level. You can see we are considered flawed democracies in this index. And if you see Latin America, we have Chile here and Uruguay. And here, I don't remember, sorry, that are considered full democracies. And other countries, here Venezuela, for example, that it's considered an authoritarian regime at this moment. So we are struggling with advances and setbacks in democracies in many Latin American countries. And you've seen the next one, please. Here are the top 10 upgrades and downgrades in the last year. If we compare 2021 to 2022, we'll see that we have in Latin America, only Chile is among of the countries who improved the performance in this index. And we have Haiti, El Salvador, and Mexico. And Mexico is a big country that decreased. They had a downgrade in terms of the characteristics of democracy that are measured by this index. And it's just to have an idea, a panorama. The next one, please. Here some more general data about Brazil and Indonesia. You see that we have Brazil 2013, 2013 million inhabitants, and you have 76, 2,200, sorry. Sorry, you see my English is not, I'm trying. And in Human Development Index, we are close in terms of poverty. we are a little better than you. But in Gini index, the last one, you see Gini index measure inequalities in income inequalities mainly, and we are much more unequal than than Indonesia. And of course, these are general indicators. We have much more details to explore, but it's just to have some data to consider. The next one, please. One of the main problems of our times is inequality in accessing public services. And we can see with the example of the COVID vaccines that, of course, for all the humans, all the countries, it was a big challenge to deal with the COVID-19 and its consequences. And we made a big effort to collaborate, to have collaboration between countries, between governments and companies and researchers to have the vaccines in a reasonable time. But not everybody had access to vaccine in the same level, in the same speed. So in many countries, people didn't didn't have the offer of vaccines comparing to other countries. And including in Brazil, we had a trajectory. We have a good experience in terms of vaccination programs. But we had a lot of difficulties with COVID because of misinformation. And probably you have the same problem here. And we had in many countries. So it's not just a problem of having the product, having the capability to produce a vaccine. This is a challenge itself. But even when we are able to collaborate in terms of scientific resources, knowledge, and institutional efforts, even if we are able to produce vaccines, we have this huge challenge in combating disinformation or misinformation, in combating the difficulties, the logistic difficulties, and the way we assure that all the people have access to something that is important for public and individual health. The next one. Some of the challenges of our times, there are any others, but some of them, demographic and territorial changes. We have, for example, in Latin America, we have a phenomena that we have very populated, concentrated regions around big cities. Like in Jakarta, we have, for example, São Paulo is the biggest city in Brazil. In Colombia, we have Bogota, is the biggest city of Colombia. Mexico City and other cities that concentrate, they have a demographic increase. And sometimes the peripheral zones have a lot of problems in terms of access to public services. For example, mobility, water. We have also the problem of pollution of the air and other problems that come with this concentration of populations. And in my state, for example, is a small state in the south of Brazil, but we have a phenomenon of, we call litoralization. A big portion of the population of our state is going to live near the sea, and we have cities inside, in the countryside, that are losing population, and it has an impact for public administration in this area. So we have these inequalities in terms of the distribution of population and its implications for public administration. Well, the pandemics, we have wars, violence and crime and corruption. In Latin America, we have a historical problem with crime and violence. And now I don't know if you are aware, In Ecuador, for example, a country in Latin America, we had one candidate for the presidency was assassinated some days ago. And in Mexico, in Brazil, in Colombia, we also have this kind of violence in politics, including the assassination of some of candidates. This is something terrible. It's something very difficult for our democracies because people are disencouraged to participate in the political process. And other kinds of violence connected with the narco traffic, for example, that is very relevant in our region. So we are improving the capacity to combat it, yes, but at the same time, the crime reorganize themselves and connect internationally too. So we have to be able, as public servants, as society, to combat very, I would say, creative industry on narcotraffics and other forms of crime, violence, and corruption. And we could talk about other forms of violence in politics. For example, in Brazil, we experienced a very difficult period in the last 4 years in terms of the way the government inflates, not only in the last 4 years, the last decade, I would say, that our politics became very polarized, violent, I would say. And this is very difficult for the public service to keep spaces for dialogue, for collaboration between government and society, and including different segments of society, including inside our families. Because of this polarization, we had some conflicts inside the families, between friends. And this is an additional challenge for solving the problems we have in many areas, because it's difficult, the dialogue and the collaboration. And other problems, mood changing in geopolitics. Now we have like this conflicts between the great economies, and how they are managing this new era of geopolitics in the world. Inequalities and inequities, I already mentioned. Climate change and its consequences, artificial intelligence and its consequences, the good and the bad and other challenges we have. But as we know, the challenges are always opportunity for innovation, for new possibilities, for new forms of collaboration. As we saw with the COVID-19, it was terrible, very difficult for all of us. But at the same time, we learned a lot. Now we have other possibilities, including with hybrid regimes of working and studying, for example, that are some of the good learnings we had in this crisis. The next one, please. This is a conference, this was a conference on combating corruption, and it was during the pandemic, and the 3 T's they mentioned, they said it's the challenge for the governments for the next decade. It was 2 years ago. Truth, trust, and transparency, the 3 T's. It's because the governments during the pandemic lost confidence from the citizens in many countries, not all of them, not at the same level, but the problem of trust between governments and society is a problem that affects us as public servants, as citizens, and is something we have to be aware and to work to understand why we have increased or decreased on trust, and how much we need to be transparent, how much we have to promote trust through transparency and the truth. And when I mentioned the misinformation related with the vaccines, and all the misinformation related not only to the pandemics, but about the politics, then the spread of misinformation, And it's difficult to identify many times, and now with the technologies, artificial intelligence, what is the truth? Who is saying the truth? And how, as governments, we prepare our governance, but also our societies. And we as researchers, as academics, we have this responsibility to how do we promote the dissemination of truth, not only the discover what is true, what are these limits, but even when we have more or less certainty about something, how can we make it be communicated for the population, or we are all the time very threatened by the untruth. The next one. So now I will show some initiatives. Just a moment. That in different levels are experiencing possibilities of dealing with these global challenges and local challenges. Here, you know, the Sustainable Development Goals we have in our countries. We are much engaged or less engaged with this set of commitments. In some areas, we are better than other areas, but we have some goals, we have some parameters to decide, well, we have to prioritize this and that, or why we will not be able to achieve this and that. And this is a form of accountability in terms of the priorities of each government, and the priorities in this case of the members of the UN and the countries that really take this agenda as an important agenda in their realities. Next one. And here is another initiative, the Open Government Partnership, that we both, Indonesia and Brazil, we are members of this initiative since its beginning in 2011. And we are now in Brazil, the next one. We are now elaborating our 6th edition of the National Plan of Open Government. And I guess Indonesia is also in this 6th edition or 5th edition, I am not sure. But we are almost at the same level in terms of our experience in elaborating and implementing these plans at the national level and also at the local level in some cities. We have some cities or regions in Brazil and in Indonesia that are members of OGP Local. And here, this report is a report from OECD. They evaluate the 30 years of Brazilian opening, we would say, our experience in terms of transparency, citizen participation, access to information, and these things. And they launched this report last year. It's interesting if you want to know more about our trajectory in the last 30 years. This is a source that could be interesting. This presentation can be shared with them, and then you will find the links to some of the documents I am mentioning here. And I am part of the committee to the elaboration of this plan, this 6th edition of the plan. Today is the last day, you see here, 21 August. Today is the last day for a public consultation to prioritize the subjects we will include in the plan in this edition. We can talk more about this if you are interested in the sequence. The next, and this is the Santa Catarina, is the state where I live. Is a small state in the south of Brazil, and our state is member of OGP Local since 2020. And we elaborated our first plan. Now we are trying to elaborate the second one, but we had a change in government, in the state government, and the things are taking more time to advance at this moment. So we can observe these changes. It's the same initiative, it's an international initiative, but depending on the local context, the themes that are prioritized, the nature of the process change. The next one. This is a website that is interesting if you want to know more about innovations for democracy in Latin America. It's a work coordinated by a research group in Germany, but it's a researcher from Latin America that works in Germany, and they created this initiative, the initiative Latino, it's called Latino, to map initiatives. You see here, in recent years, thousands of institutional designs have been created aiming to not only include more citizens in the political process, but also to make governance more responsive and institutions more accountable, in addition to strengthening the rule of law and promoting social equality. Latino unveils such innovations and investigates whether and how these new forms of citizen participation might improve the quality of democracy. And you see that here the focus is mainly in citizen-led initiatives. We also have some government-led initiatives, but usually when they put an emphasis on citizen participation. And many of the initiatives that were mapped in different countries of the region are led by civil society organizations aiming to improve social equity, inclusion, and citizen participation. Next. This is the very famous Brazilian experience of participatory budgeting. You probably heard someday about the participatory budget of Porto Alegre. Porto Alegre is the capital of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, the southern state in Brazil, the state where I was born. And Porto Alegre, 30 years ago, was the first city to continuously use this instrument to democratize the decisions on the budget, the local budget. And we have today participatory budgeting all over the world in different forms, but Porto Alegre was in Brazil the most, I would say, ambitious initiative, and this is why it became so recognized, because it was ambitious. At the moment it was conceived and implemented, but also because they had not only the purpose of involving citizens, but also in promoting social justice through the participation process on budget. And some other initiatives on participatory budgeting do not have these ambitions to promote social distribution of resources. And so it's different. There are many initiatives in Brazil, but as you see in this title, it was a paper from 2019 asking Paradise Lost, the crisis of participatory budgeting in its own birthplace. And not only in Porto Alegre, but in other cities in Brazil that some years ago used this kind of participatory instrument, they changed, they didn't use more, or they continue to use, but with less ambitious in terms of the quality of participation or in terms of the amount of money that is decided through this instrument. So you see the same instrument or the same purpose can change during the time and lose its power in terms of promoting participation, for example. The next. Here we have some initiatives in different cities in Latin America. The pioneer one was this Bogotá Como Vamos. Bogotá is the capital of Colombia. And this initiative was started by academics, the media in that city, and some civil society organizations, maybe corporate foundations connected to the business sector. And they started this initiative to define some measurement of indicators of development in different parts of the city. They said, oh, we need to have some concrete information to follow the improvements, the necessities, considering the differences between one area of the city and another, to admit that the conditions are not the same, and not always the governments of the cities are able to produce this information. Then they say, we as society, as academics, as the media, we can produce and monitor this information every year, and not only produce this information, but also use this information to debate with citizens and debate with government these indicators, this information, to take decisions based on these informations. This experience of Bogotá was very relevant when it was created, and then many other cities in Colombia were inspired by this initiative in Bogotá, and then other cities adopted something like this, and then they created a network of cities como Vamos in Colombia. And this experience in Colombia inspired other cities in other countries in the region. Then we had, for example, the initiative of Cordoba. Cordoba is a city in Argentina, and their experience is very, very interesting. If you want to know more, is one of the most interesting we have in the continent, because they really engaged it's not only about producing information, but using information to debate and to influence decisions. And Cordoba is very successful in this, in promoting citizenship through information or with information. And it was led by the universities in Cordoba. So it's another characteristic of this initiative. And they also had the Red Argentina por Ciudades Justas Democráticas, seria fair, democratic, and sustainable cities, a network. And then we had in Brazil, São Paulo, our biggest city, was the first one in Brazil to be inspired by Bogotá and by other cities and created this movement. And then we had the Brazilian network. This is the Brazilian network for fair and sustainable cities. In my city, Florianopolis, we were part of this movement too. But at this moment, currently, they are not so empowered anymore. So you see, we have some innovations. They produce results, different results, mixed results, but not all of them, or few of them, really are able to sustain these initiatives. In some cases, because in the case of São Paulo, for example, they are still active, but they change the way of acting. And part of what they did in the beginning, now the government do. So they said, okay, we as academics or civil society, we can initiate something, innovate in producing and using this information to take decisions, but we are not able to continue to produce this every year, every time, because it needs resources, and we are not responsible in the limit to produce it. But we can demand this from the local government. Then the local government understand, oh yes, this is our responsibility. and they start to produce this information in a regular basis. But civil society must be continuously demand that this is really produced and used. If we don't continue the social pressure, sometimes it loses forces in the government. And it happened in my city, in Florianopolis. We produced the first reports, discussed, invited the politicians, the candidates for the city hall to debate. We were very active. Then we were able to approve a local regulation to include in the law that the governments should continue to produce. Oh, we celebrated. We were able to approve it. Discussing with the local parliament, they approved. Very good. The next year, the mayor produced information. Oh, very good. We participated in the debates. But in the second year, they didn't produce anymore, the local government. And we, as academics and civil society, we didn't demand. We said nothing. And stop. The law is there. Is in our local regulations that the government should produce a plan of goals with indicators and be accountable. And so what I am trying to say is it doesn't help to approve a law if we don't use the law and if we don't keep the pressure, the capacity of organization and demanding accountability. So accountability, I will arrive at the concept in a moment. Accountability is not only an institutional or formal aspect of democracy. It must be something really incorporated in our daily practice, our relationships between government and society. And we have other initiatives, but I will go to the next, please. We also have initiatives, international initiatives, such as the Open Contracting Partnership, that is similar to the Open Government Partnership, but it's more specific about opening and promoting transparency in the process of public procurement. And we have international networks such the OCP, and the next one. This is a local initiative that our research group was coordinating. We finished this project 2 weeks ago. We are still working in reporting it. And it was because in our law of access to information, of the national law that was approved in 2011, there is an article that says that the governments, including the local governments, they should publish information about contracting process, procurement contracting process, in an open format, open data. But the municipalities don't know what pattern, what standards for opening data they should use. There is no regulation, no orientation about what standard to use. Then you can create your standard for your municipality. I can create mine. You can create. So we are the government of 3 different municipalities. You create your own way to publish open data. I create my own. You create you. You attend the law. You fulfill the law because you are publishing the information in an open format. Open. It's because a machine can read it and use it. Okay, but if we create our own standard, we cannot compare. And one of the great advantages of open data is the possibility of comparing information to see if you are managing well or not your process of contracting. And so we received a demand from a municipality in Brazil, in our state, that said, oh, we are being punished by the oversight institution of the state because they say that the way we are publishing our data is not good. Is not, but they really don't say what what would be the best way to publish. Could you help us to define a way or to find a possible reference? And then we started to investigate, and we didn't find. And in fact, we talked with a lot of specialists. We had very different initiatives in different parts of the country, governments that published their data, civil society organizations that suggest something, but we don't have really a standard. Then we started to create this standard in our state. Then we elaborated like a network, a community to define the standards for how to publish this open data. And then you can see if you want to know more. This was the beginning of the project, but now we have the results, and you can see in the website. And if you want to know more about this, I will be very happy to share. The next one. These are two reports from Transparency International in Brazil, issued in 2020, 2021. It was during the pandemic, but the reason here is because in the recent decades, Brazil was able to develop the anti-corruption framework. We approved new legislation. We had the strengthening of oversight institutions. We had different programs to promote integrity, to promote transparency, to promote open government, to promote access to information. So we were doing well in terms of combating corruption. But we also had some ways of combating corruption that are very dangerous and sometimes are worse than the corruption itself. And this is really, really a trauma for us now, because when we use corruption as the main cause or the main problem, it could be sometimes a tool to investigate only one group or only the enemies of one side of the political spectrum. And we had some abuses in the use of the instruments, including the legal instruments, in supposedly to combat corruption. Okay, we had corruption, right? We really had corruption. But to combat corruption, if you destroy or you promote distrust in the political system, sometimes it's worse than the corruption itself. So you have to balance this. And in Brazil, we had terrible consequences of the way we combated corruption in some situations. And it influenced the elections, and the new government was elected in this moment when many people believed that we were improving in combating corruption. But then this government stopped or promoted setbacks in our capacity to combat corruption. So you see, sometimes you are elected promoting, saying that we will combat corruption, but you, at the same time, are weakening the framework to combat corruption. And then here they were, the Transparency International was showing the risks and the setbacks we were having at that moment. The next one. And this one is a newspaper covering about this, and it says in Portuguese, Brazil, an example from an example on anti-corruption to the risk of setbacks we had. And now we are still dealing with these setbacks. And not only the setbacks in terms of institutional capacity of investigating and combating corruption, we had this. But more than this, I guess the main consequence is the distrust on government by the population. And this is difficult because the distrust or the mistrust doesn't help us to combat corruption, because it creates this lack between government and society, this gap. The next. Bon, I don't know how many minutes. Yes. Yes. Okay. Because I showed first some examples, and I will show briefly some concepts that we are using to study these examples. And here is a classical representation of, we have the people, and then democracies are the principles, and to whom the elected politics must be responsive to the people, right? So this is the classical axis. People vote and delegates power to the elected politics, and they are responsive to the people. And then we'll have another elections. The elections are the main mechanism we have for accountability. But the elected politics has the responsibility to influence bureaucrats. Battery is the bureaucrats. It's missing one, and they respond to the elected politics. But in some cases, we have this direct connection between the bureaucrats and the people. And we can connect this with the concept of open government, or accountability by the bureaucrats directly to the people. The next one. This is the classical way the bureaucracies resist to the pressure from outside. In part, this is good, because we preserve our purposes, our characteristics as bureaucrats, but sometimes it means being unresponsive and not open to the dialogue and the pressures from society. And then in this other possibility, you see that the government, the bureaucracy, the public bureaucracy, it's more flexible, it's more aware and open to different influences. But how to do this in a transparent way, in an accountable and a fair way? The next one. And here is the concept we adopted in our research group about the co-production of information and control. If you had the opportunity to read the article you received, it's about this concept. And then we took the concept of co-production of public services, and we mixed with the concept of social accountability. And then we say, well, we have in the governments the regular producers of information and control, the oversight institutions, the producing information activities we have in the governments. So the governments and sometimes the academics or the institutes of statistics in each country are responsible, is part of their mission, of their purpose, to produce public information and to control or to oversight the functioning of public administration. It's part of their regular work job, responsibility. In some situations, the users also produce information, And the example I mentioned of Bogotá Como Vamos, it was an initiative from civil society, from the media, from academics, in producing information and using this information to influence decisions. And then they started to merge. They started to combine efforts of producing information and control from the government and from civil society. So the users can also be engaged in producing information and using information to improve public services. And then we can say the citizens are co-responsible by the quality of the public administration and co-responsible by the accountability quality, the accountability level we have. As I mentioned before in the example of my own city, when we approved the law that say the government must produce information, we celebrated. Okay, it was a victory at that moment, but we stopped demanding it in the next year. Then the government stopped to produce it, and we didn't do anything. So we lost this co-production thing, and we don't have anymore this instrument in practice. We have in law, we don't have in practice. So we need to continue the collaboration or the pressure to have this value or this product being produced. Next. This is developed in the paper you received, and we try to separate 4 possibilities. It's about the stage of the incorporation of accountability in the political culture. We said in the first one, this one is the traditional accountability model. We have elections, mainly elections. We elect our representatives, and they manage the executive, the parliament, and the judiciary. The judiciary, I don't know here, but in Brazil, they are not elected, but they are appointed or they are part of the bureaucracy of the judiciary. But here we have the system of checks and balances between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And the people only participate as user, but without accountability effort, participate mainly during elections. This is the traditional model. In this one, we called cross-sectional accountability. We start to have some forms of interaction between the inside and outside the government during the implementation, not only in the elections. The third we called systemic accountability. You see a main difference. The frontiers between government and society are open. And then we could say it's an open government because we have more interaction. This is part of the daily practice to call, for example, the university, we need, as the example I said, a municipality said, I need to publish my information in an open format, my data, open data. How do I do it? Then let's call the university, let's call a civil society organization, let's call other specialists, and let's do it together. So we have more avenues, more possibilities of collaboration to running the government, and this is part of the regular way we govern. And in the fourth possibility, you see that there is no frontier, there is no government. It's like an utopical model that we have collaborations, but we don't have specialization. No one is specialized, or there is no one mainly responsible for producing accountability or information. The next. This is an example that is in the text. We try to show some examples of how it happens. And this is in the city of Maringá, in the state of Paraná in Brazil. They had a problem with storage of public items in health, in education. For example, medicines that are bought by the local government, and they lost part of this because of bad storage. And the social observatory of Maringá that was a civil society organization, they were very upset about that. Oh no, we have knowledge about good storage. Why don't we use this in our own city? And they also had corruption, and the people were very upset about these corruption scandals. And they said, oh, we as civil society, academics, business people, we can help the city hall to solve this problem. Let's collaborate. And they initiated a collaboration to improve the system of contracting and store the goods. And so the city hall invested the building, the infrastructure, the workforce, the financial resources. They approved a law that regulates purchasing and store. And there was a collaboration between the city hall and the city council. And the Social Observatory of Maringá applied technical expertise on storage and inventory control and mobilization capacity. And they were able to co-produce efficient purchasing to supply the demands, appropriate storage and purchasing and inventory control updated and available to the public. So it became from a case of bad storage, loss of materials, of items like medicines, to an example for many other municipalities of how you can improve the control of the items managed by the city hall, and this could be transparent with the help, the expertise of your own civil society. The next one. This is too much for now. I can talk about this in other moments. I will share the presentations it's because in Portuguese too, the details I didn't translate everything, but it's part of the idea of a complex system. Accountability, the systems of accountability are composed by many mechanisms. The rules, the more stable rules, the electoral process, but also many ways we have to exercise accountability during the mandates by civil society, by the parliament, by the courts, and they are part of a system, and there are interactions, and the results of the whole system depends on the performance of each of these parts and their interactions. And as I am an academic, a researcher, and I am also part of a civil society organization. So how can I do in my position? What is the role I can play? There are some roles I can play, others I can't. You are another part of the system. You can do something there. And possibly I can talk to you, oh, I have this problem. What could you do in your part of the system about this? So we can think in the system and do what I can in my position, but also to understand the role of the others and try to influence, try to advance the performance of other parts of the system, and then I will be able to achieve what I want, a better service, for example, or a better governance, etc. The next one. This is the concept of accountability. We can think about a more confrontation and adversarial way of doing accountability with protests, with denouncing, with judicial and police way of combating corruption, for example. There is part of it, but we also can have possibilities of collaboration, as I mentioned in that example. This approach is based on the growing realization that there are many development and governance challenges and contexts that require long-term political informed collaboration between state and civil society actors. And some examples I showed are evidences of that. The next. This is a definition or an detailing of this approach. And we could say that in social, collaborative, and relational approaches of accountability, the focus is on mutual engagement and relationships among different actors, including users of public services and citizens interested or affected by the decisions on a certain theme or area. And instead of this traditional principal agent perspective, where the principal people delegates power and only monitor and sanction their agent citizens and public agents work together and learn in the course of action on how to deal with complex problems and respond to needs and expectations. So beyond these improvements in institutional framework of accountability, the quality of relationships between agents in each context are central to promote, to improve accountability. Next. I will skip this, it's another example. These are other two papers that are here, and we can talk tomorrow maybe. Next. The concept of open government, you probably already are familiar if you are in this area, I don't know. But usually open government is related to access to information, civic participation, public accountability as values to improve governance and solve public challenges. Another definition, it's a culture of governance that promotes the principle of transparency, integrity, accountability, and stakeholder participation in support of democracy and inclusive growth. And here you see that there is this idea of an inclusive growth. Next. This is in Spanish, not in English. I'm sorry. I couldn't find the version in English. But it's a form of representing the possibilities of the open government. And the main areas are transparency, accountability, and integrity. And it includes data, public information, and simple language. Our effort to be more simple in communicating with citizens, considering their special needs, their language, their repertoire, not using our repertoire from academy and from government, but really be interested in really communicate with citizens and listen to citizens, not only publish the information on the website. And the other area is citizen participation, debates, public consultation, citizen engagement, co-design and co-production of public services, and collaboration and innovation. And here we talk about collaboration between the public and the private sector. For example, using public information, using data to design new ways of providing public services, for example.
I'm sorry,
so we
Paula.
have many possibilities for the concept of open
Sorry
government.
to interrupt, 5 more minutes, please.
Sorry?
Can you do 5 more minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
So the next one, this is the concept of collaborative governance. I will leave it with you, and you see that it's in the same line, but the main message is the collaborative governance is a way to address problems or carry out a public purpose that could not be achieved by individual actors alone. So we need to collaborate. No one has the complete power, the complete answer. We need to collaborate. How to do this? Because the power is often asymmetrical, is difficult. The next. This is another paper about the structural elements for the co-production of public goods. And then you see we have transparency, participation, trust, accountability, and information as bases, as structural elements when we are talking about collaborative governance or co-production. The next. Please, the next. I will skip this to conclude with what kind of public servant? If we really want to promote collaborative governance, co-production, to improve our democracies through transparency, participation, collaboration. Next. Here is a representation of the 21st century public servant. Is someone who is a resource waiver, a storyteller, because we really care about the different people, the different conditions of each people we work with. A commissioner, a broker, working in the frontiers of different sectors and knowledge, a municipal entrepreneur, a networker, a navigator, and a system architect. We have to understand the system. We are working in this part, but we are seeing the system and thinking this way to improve what we want. The next. The other idea of the leadership in this century would be a person who is a systems convening, someone able to convene people around a common problem to find a solution and to collaborate in a long-term perspective. This is a book, it's available for downloading if you want to know more. It's very interesting to this perspective. Next. Next. Here are some of the characteristics of this systems convener. And this is a quote. I often say that my goal is trying to create a climate for other people and giving them the platform to solve problems they already have solutions for, but they've never been empowered to solve. So sometimes I guess our role as academics, as public servants, is to create this climate, these possibilities for people working together. We will not solve the problem alone. Nobody can solve the problem alone, but we, because our legitimacy, because we know the system, because we know the rules, we can create this space for collaboration. The next. I will skip here more description of the characteristic of this kind of profile. The next. Next. To conclude, it's not possible to see the question inside, but the question is, what kind of bridges are we building? And we have a discussion because sometimes we, as government, for example, we build this kind of bridge. We are here, the boats can come to me, and then I will offer you the solution, the service. In other situations, we have this movable bridge. Sometimes it's okay to cross, sometimes it's not possible to cross. Depends on who is in charge, depends on the context. Sometimes we don't have exactly a bridge. We have a path we built during the process, step by step, stone by stone. Then we have a bridge that is more dependent on the context. And in these cases, we have more structured building kinds of bridges. We have more access to sustain this collaboration or this bridge, and it will be more sustainable. Then finishing, I guess I finished. Next. Well, I will skip that. Here, some of the reference I mentioned. And finally, next. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Paula. You seem very energetic and more energetic when the work is getting late. So I don't want to discuss more about what you've been presenting to us, but it is very wonderful presentations and it is very engaging, and you're touching up to subjects that we've never think about. And especially I'm fascinated with your last presentations about building bridges. Building bridges need effort from multi-sectors, not only from the governments, but also from other sectors, private and civil society, and many different things. And then you also touch about the need of sustainability, co-producing informations. So in order to be accountable, you need to be in a fair ground of cooperation, right? Not only from the government, you're asking government to be accountable to you, but you also being demanded to be accountable. So this kind of concept that we will explore, and I hope you can contribute to the discussion. So our students coming from different background, Paula. So they are coming from either private sector, also international organization. They're coming from different kind parts of ministries, and also educator, and also journalism. So they're coming from different background. So here they are, and I would let them to ask you questions or give comments, and I would like to start from my left side, one, and then my right side, one, and perhaps two at once. It's fine. Okay, so we have until, we have plenty of time until 9 actually. So please, two questions first from here, and then, okay, I can see your hand raised, Bu Desi, and then from the right side, please. I will have some kind of competition between the left and the right. So is there anyone from the right? I'll give you opportunity. 1, 2, 3. No? I give it to my left side. So Bu Desi, 1. Okay. So 3 from this side. Bu Desi, and then hang on for a sec. This is how we conduct. So thank you, Paula.
Professor Paula.
So this is how we conduct, okay? You have to tell her who you are and where you come from, and then others also follow. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you, Ibu Ratri. Good evening, Miss Professor Paula. Yeah, my name is Desi. I'm a student of this public policy school. I work at UNDP. Okay. I have two questions. First of all, I'm very impressive with your paper. And my question is from your observation about Indonesia. In which breeds is government Indonesia currently? And the second is, we know Brazil and Indonesia facing the same thing about the corruption. What kind of step that we taken to reduce corruption at every level? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
The Honorable Professor Paula, thank you for your presentation about this evening. It's so very complicated. And I have two questions for this presentation. First, about the effort to build democratic accountability in this country may be analyzed focusing, but I would like to introduce myself. My name is Nadia Putri Joshua, Public Policy Management 2023, and I am from a public sector, but a private sector from the PricewaterhouseCoopers Indonesia. And the first question about the effort to build democratic accountability in this country may be analyzed focusing on the variety of innovative ways how citizens and government interact to exercise control over the public administration. In Indonesia regulation, we have Undang-Undang number 14, years of 2008, about public information destructure state. And this regulation said about the right to obtain public information is a derogable right, limited for certain reasons. And for the question, what do you think about related these cases? Is the first question. And the second question, I saw very interesting about your slide about the SDGs program, Sustainable Development Goals. And we know about the SDGs program for the 16th point is about the promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. And we know about the questions about the example real implementation in the government for discuss is about the example for your paper or your anything about that. Thank you, Professor and Bu Ratri. Good afternoon.
So, okay, so there are two questions from Daisy and also Nadia. Please.
Yes. Well, on combating corruption, yes, it's a from the Brazilian experience, I guess one way to improving in a sustainable way is to involve the citizens in the local level. It's very important, but not in a way that promote more distrust. As we saw in, for example, the example I mentioned from Maringá, and also one example I didn't explore because of the time. These cities, it was local governments, they were like champions in corruption. They had terrible cases of corruption, and the population was very angry. And the private sector, it's good you are from the private sector, they had an important role too, because they said, oh, we can't accept this anymore in our city. One possibility would be like to elect someone, sometimes it happens, to elect someone that says, oh, I will combat corruption, corruption, everything is corrupt, the state is bad. This is a possibility, but usually it's very dangerous. So I prefer, and these two cities are examples of a different possibility. Okay, we have a serious problem of corruption, a structural problem of corruption. Let's join forces between the private sector, universities, civic society organizations, journalists. Let's convene is the word, different expertises, different resources, different knowledge, and really take this problem seriously and think in a sustainable way how to solve it. And it's not a miracle, but it's possible. The municipality of Londrina, one of the examples, they were like examples of corruption. Now they are examples in combating corruption and promoting transparency and improving the quality of public services. And this is because they were able, in their context, to involve different segments of society and to really understand the causes of the problem and to work to fix the system in its and not just blame the politicians on to put everybody in jail. Sometimes it's necessary, but you don't fix everything putting all the corrupts in jail. It will not solve the corruption. And so we have to separate. If we put everybody in the same label, oh, they are corrupt, the business sector is corrupt, or the politicians are corrupt, we will not solve anything with this general conceptualization of corruption. We have to do the daily and more constructive work. This is part of the path. The other one, of course, we have to improve regulation, we have to improve technology, the use of technology to combat crime and corruption, to improve our legislation, to invest in capacity building among civil public servants. Of course, we have to do the regular things, but also I would say that it's very important to create these spaces for people involved with the problem, because corruption is not the same situation in all cases. Okay, what case of corruption we have? For example, in Brazil, we had corruption in school meals. We have like cartels of companies that are specialized in corruption in school meals. And this is terrible because the effect is directly in the students, the more vulnerable population, but they are specialized in corruption in this sector. So the answer, the response to this is specific. So you need to understand the system of school meals, contracting, and to work in each part of this system. I have more elaboration on this example of school meals. I can share with you if you are interested. But I guess there is no magical solution, and we can share a lot. Other thing that is very good is the sharing between one city with another city. So two cities that were very bad in terms of corruption, they were able to improve. Then they became a case for other municipalities to go there and see what they did. Of course, you will not be able to copy and paste because the contexts are different, the actors are different, but you can learn with the other and say, oh, he did, they were able to deal, we can do too. Sometimes it works, sometimes not, but we, as universities, for example, we could promote this kind of interchange between municipalities, for example, or between national governments, in sharing their experience and their frustration, their mistakes too. The mistakes, as I mentioned here, we made a mistake because we didn't continue to demand accountability, then it stopped. So it was a mistake or a lack of capacity of keeping people engaged to promote something. And this is difficult to promote sustainable cooperation. Sorry, because I'm, and the second one, well, I forgot. Can you help me? I didn't took note.
Yes, are you asking us about the private sectors and how to?
Yes, please. Yes, and since you mentioned the private sector, I didn't emphasize examples from the private sector. I'm sorry, but we have. And I mentioned in the case of Bogotá Como Vamos, we had the engagement of the business sector. In the case of Maringá and Londrina, yes, we had. And I guess the private sector many times are engaged in corruption or in promoting this distrust in the government, but many other times there are very good examples of the private sector engaged in improving quality of information, the use of data. So in this example of the project I mentioned on opening data, the private sector can help in two ways. One way is helping to developing the technology, because in the local governments contract private companies to provide their information systems, their information technologies, and so they can be partners of this kind of cooperation effort to improve the technology systems used by the local governments. Some of these companies don't like this kind of cooperation because it seems we are like competing with them, and because it's like a free, it's not for profit, it's a collaboration to produce better information, and they will not make money in offering this solution. But there is the possibility of using data. If the municipalities in our state start to produce and to publish open data, you imagine how the innovations could flourish using the public information, the open data. So I don't know how we can sometimes convince the private sector in some areas to be partner of the construction of the solution, because even the private sector will win something in the medium term. Another example, the school meals, for example. We have good private organizations, private enterprises that are good providers of, for example, school meals or other items the governments need, but others are not. So I guess the competitive private organizations, that organizations who are more committed with integrity, with ethics in their sector, they could be more valued and more invited with more emphasis to participate in these processes. And I would say this is a mistake we, in our experience, did. We didn't really invite it with emphasis the private sector, and possibly this was a gap in our collaboration model, because we say, no, the private sector, I don't know if I can trust, but I think we have to test and engage them to promote trust. I don't know what is your experience on that, if you think it's possible to count on the private sector as a partner to develop this kind of collaborative solution. You think it's possible? It's your own experience? Yes? Good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Paula. All right, so we move to the next sessions of question and answer. And for your information, some of our students coming from a National Eradications of Corruption Commission. So yeah, we're talking across the board now. And then also Desi, the person who asked you first, so she is working into this smart city research, and it's connected with the open government, I think, about the transparency of information and stuff. So yeah, this is open, is very open avenue for us to collaborate, especially with Professor Paula. So she highlights very important things about the sustainability, right? Sustainability, and you have to know that the role of academia, we are here standing in front of you, and also you as students, is to communicate what we've already produced to the decision maker, and then can be applicable to the society. And then it's a way, communication is not one way, but it's multi-dimensional way, right? So yeah, now is your opportunity to ask questions. And then her case in Bogota, especially, is already proven to us that you have to keep pressuring the government to be transparent, and you be transparent as well, right? Two already ask question, and I would like to give opportunity for this side to ask question, one and another. We don't have much time. Don't waste the time. She won't be here for a long time. Yes. Okay, one more. If not, I will give the opportunity to decide. No? Nothing? Decide, please. One more? No? Okay, go ahead.
No problem.
Thank you, Ms. Ratri. Good night, everyone. Thank you for the chance given to me. Let me introduce myself. My name is Silviana Marianti Saputri. I'm a student of postgraduate Master State of Finance. I will ask you one question. Unfortunately, I work in Ministry of Land Use and Spatial Planning, like planology. How is the concept of accountability in realizing good governance, especially in public service like me? I work at a public servant. Maybe you could give example in other country, like you talk about in Argentina or Colombia, like that. Thank you, Ms. Paula.
Well, I didn't mention today, but recently we me and my PhD students, we made a comparison about accountability practices in different sectors. And we chose health, water and sanitation, and public safety. And we defined some dimensions to compare. And we saw that the practices, the accountability practices varies a lot from one sector to another. We are still investigating to understand more the causes, multiple causes. But for example, in health, in Brazil, we have a long trajectory in promoting citizen participation. The design of our health system is based on citizen participation, on decentralization to local government, and collaboration between levels of government. And it is based also in opening data for research. So the role of researchers in health, it's much more prominent and valued than in other areas of public service, such as public safety. So we have a huge chronic problem on violence in Brazil. And in this area of public safety, we have almost zero open data. We have almost zero citizen participation. We have in law, but we don't have in practice. So if we compare these two areas, the information we have from, for example, homicides is from the health databases, not from the public safety databases. It's a sector that traditionally was not open. Open in the sense of including citizens, including researchers. Now, some organizations, some researchers are finally dedicating to this sector, and we are starting to open this black box. But in infrastructure is another area very complicated, in social assistance, in education. So in our case, and I guess, I don't know, but possibly it's the same here, the more open public service is health, for many reasons. And the other sectors sometimes try to copy the practices from health, but it's not enough to copy the design. You have really to develop your own way of, for example, promoting opening of information and use of information to discuss, for example, public safety. It's different to discuss this than to discuss health. In some municipalities, the strategy to discuss violence problem is to call people to discuss health, because people believe that, okay, a discussion on health will be serious. We can participate, it will be open. If they call us to discuss something in public safety, I don't know if I go, or I just go when there is a crisis, and we can continue this. So there are some examples, some successful examples in involving citizens in different kinds of services in Brazil and other countries. But if we take these sectors, we will see main differences from one sector to another. And I guess we can learn from one sector to another, but it's not enough to copy and paste. And I would say, excuse me, because I remember something else about the private sector in information, and now I forgot
Nadia,
again. Well,
he's talking to you.
okay, if I remember, because now I remember something, another example of the engagement of private sector in information, but I forgot, sorry. If I remember, I tell you later.
All right, thank you
I'm
so
a
much.
little confused because
It's getting late. It's getting
yeah,
late, and you're exhausted, I guess. Just been here since the morning time, right?
yeah,
And then you keep on going and going and going. Yeah. So, is that all?
yeah. No, it's because it's speaking in English and it's speaking for
Yeah, translating.
an audience. You know,
Yeah.
it's like
That's very hard.
too much emotion for me. Sorry.
All right. So Silvana is already like stressing things that really important for us as a researcher, and Professor Paul has already also stressed that this is a very important if we want to do research in that kind of field, especially public accountability or information accountability and open government especially, you have to know what cases that you are bringing. Means that comparability, right? Comparability. She's studying about Latin America, but not all sectors can be applied because there are certain differences that you cannot research, and different informations and the data as well. So if you want to do research Indonesia compared to Brazil, you have to know exactly what kind of thing that be comparable to each other. It takes a village to get everybody on board. Then the last question, perhaps we have 15 minutes. How many questions you want to take? So, yeah, example to share, or perhaps can be another future potential research collaboration between cities, especially when she applied her method about bridges. There are 4 bridges, right? That's 4 kind of bridges, and that's an analogy of how multiple sectors can collaborate or cooperate for many issues, I think. So is there any question from you about that paper, or anything about whatever in your mind related with this open government, especially transparency? Yes, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Can I ask something from the Zoom?
No, because it's connected with that stages.
Okay, great. Okay.
Because it's connected with this, because it's difficult to classify a country. You ask, oh, in what stage we are? We in that paper you possibly read, we tried to classify Brazil, but not the whole country. Yes, we can say something about the stage of the incorporation of accountability in our political culture. But now what I would say that is a continuous process, but it's not a linear process, nor an homogeneous process. As I mentioned, we were improving our capacity to combating corruption. Then we had like a very big problems in the strategies we were using to combat corruption, and the way it was discussed with public opinion, the way the mistrust in government was promoted. Then I guess we set back in our capacity. So it's not linear, it's not in one same direction, and it's not homogeneous from one sector to another, to connecting what we mentioned about the sectors. We could say we have less corruption in one sector or another. Sometimes we have more information about corruption in health because we have more information in the area of health. There are other areas. You say, oh, we don't have corruption in public safety purchasing. Of course, we don't have data. We don't have control. We don't have corruption because we are not able to follow, to investigate. So it's, as you were saying, it's dangerous. So it's difficult to classify. But of course, we tried to do it with that model. And we said something about Brazil, that we were probably between the second and the third stage as the country. Probably Indonesia is the same, probably, because you probably have these initiatives of cooperation, including these national commissions of combating corruption is an initiative to collaborate and to work in improving the system, right? But I don't know if they are sustainable, these initiatives. So the third stage, and especially it's about a sustainable kind of cooperation in combating corruption, having in mind that you have differences from one sector to another, you have difference from one municipality to another, something that works in one place will not work in another place because you don't have the same conditions. So it varies from one sector to another, from one municipality to another, from one moment to another in the same country.
Thank you so much. And we still have actually 8 minutes. So you're explaining us about replicability, right? So to replicate what one city has been done as a good example or as best practice, and then to others is also one way of strategy, right? So we still have time to have one more question. Okay, please, gentleman with white shirt.
Okay. My name is Helmi Satria Fahmi. I am as employee of taxation at Texas, a student of public policy. I want to ask you about your paper. In your paper, you said that it was stated that the importance of tax socialization and conveyed that there was major partner investment and the results of the joint production process. I was very interested in the tax socialization. First, I want to ask you about the relationship about accounting and co-production of information with tax socialization. And the second, you say that the considered accountability and co-production of information and control as an investment. May I know why you said that there should be this as investment? I'm very interested.
Yeah, sorry, just to see that the part. No, I don't.
I'm interested about the tax socialization. And the second, I want to ask you about investment. You said that your paper, it is investment. I'm interested in this paper.
Yeah, I don't remember
Your
part
paper.
we mentioned about investment.
In part-
Sorry, we are confabulated here.
In your paper, in number 13, 7,
Control
18,
as
7.
yes, now I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
remember?
was trying to remember.
Yes, you remember.
Yes, and because this paper was in 2015, right? Now, no, it's not because I don't remember the paper. It's because the word that we use changed. When we talk about socialization, it's much about what we are now calling maybe learning with the other experiences, and it's not. We cannot replicate one experience to another place. We cannot replicate in the sense of copy and paste because the conditions are different. But we have to invest. It's an investment in terms of building bridges. For example, to have a sustainable possibility to improving public services, what includes combating corruption, but it's not just combating corruption, because we can combat corruption, but we have to build alternatives to improve the services. It's not just about combating corruption, it's about improving the quality of services, improving social inclusion, improving access to that services, improving the efficiency. So combating corruption is one part of the solution, but you need to construct the other conditions to improve the services. And this socialization, we use that, it's about creating these opportunities for convening people who are interested in solving that problem, and to promote this kind of dialogue and collective action to elaborate the solutions and to build the bridges to sustain the process to continue improving. This involves creating connections between people and institutions. And also, as I mentioned, you can learn with the experience with another municipality similar to you with this. Then I would say this idea of co-producing information become part of the culture, become part of the political culture. Instead of blaming the politics, instead of blaming the corrupts in the private and in the public sector, we include citizens and the private sector and the academics in this kind of collaboration way of solving collective problems, collaborative way of solving collective problems. And then accountability becomes part of our political culture. But what kind of accountability? Is not just the formal institutions, is not just to punish the corruption. It's about to avoid corruption. It's about to improve the government, improve the services. So it's another kind of thinking about accountability and a different form of thinking about the role of each citizen or each institution in this process. So it's a socialization process of a way of thinking about corruption, or about accountability as something that is, the citizens are co-responsible for the quality of the services and for the quality of the accountability systems itself. And so it's because it's an investment of a long-term process. This requires continuous efforts to sustain the process. So again, the images of the bridges. The first model of the bridges, the pier, or the second one, the movable bridge that's open and close, open and close. Possibly they are less expensive to build. We need just an initiative, a solution, a magic solution here, or here is the solution. But the fourth model of the bridge requires more project, more resources, and you need more people and access to sustain this bridge. But sometimes you don't have the project in your mind when you start. You don't have all the resources when you start. You do not even know the problem when you start. We don't see the whole picture when you start to understand a problem and to tackle a problem. So possibly the best investment is the step-by-step, the stone bridge, because you just build the first stone, the first step. Then you understand the context and you walk one more step, or you put one more stone in that bridge. Then when you are able to understand the problem, to understand who you need to involve to solve that problem, then you have the conditions to design the project for the main bridge. Possibly it would be a bad investment in the beginning to put a lot of effort or a lot of legitimacy or a lot of money to a big initiative to combat something or to promote something, if you even don't understand the whole problem. So sometimes it's better to start with that simple bridge than to invest a lot of efforts in a big project that possibly will not be used in the future. You have a beautiful bridge, but it's not be useful. Just to elaborating the idea from the images of the bridges.
Wow, that's excellent presentations, and thank you. Yeah, give a round of applause to Professor Paula. So you have already illustrated like how your model can be translated to our issues, right, in our country. The comparability between what has been done to whatever issues that we try to explore perhaps in the future can also be applied. So that's an excellent presentations that we can use to our own research. So ladies and gentlemen, regret to say that we come to an end of this beautiful lecture. And we savor this moment and thanking you again and give her another applause to her. Thank you so much for this very rare opportunity again. One question though, I would like to ask, but you don't need to ask to respond this today. Accountability versus legitimacy. We can discuss about it later. So thank you so much for your attendance, and hopefully you can bring this back home and think through, and then can be also one way to understand about the whole picture or project that you probably have in mind in the future. And again, thank you. I will conclude this guest lecture with goodbye, good night, safe trip back home.
Izin live ya teman-teman.
Mohon izin live, Bapak Ibu.